You're listening to Catching Wildfire, a podcast by the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association. It's my honor today and privilege to introduce David Blankenship. David Blankenship has a long history in public safety. It goes back to Colorado Springs and even the Bureau of Land Management before that. Chief Zagaris reported having known him over 40 years, which conflicts with David's assertion that he's actually 39. But that said, David is one of the founders at Intera. He, subsequent to their sale of Intera, David came to the Western Fire Chief, where he was our Chief Technology Officer, and is now leading the efforts across a lot of industry, but primarily at Emergent. We'll give David a chance to talk to that. We're also joined by Chief Zagaris, better known as Chief Z, virtually a legend in the wildfire community. Spent 18 years leading the wildfire efforts for California Office of Emergency Services. He's now a senior policy advisor for the Western Fire Chiefs, a good friend, and a true loyalist to our profession. I'm your host today. I'm Jeff Johnson. I'm the Chief Emeritus of the Western Fire Chiefs and have a history at Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue as their chief for 15 years and then executive director for the Western Chiefs, and one of a handful of people that got FirstNet off the ground and have stayed involved ever since. So today we're here to talk about Emergent. And, one of our questions will be, of course, what is Emergent? But I want to start, David, by saying, when I first came across you at Colorado Springs, how did you get from your origins to the head of Emergent and across multiple business platforms as a tech guy?
Not the normal way, I would say. Super blue collar IT guy. I went to work for Colorado Springs Utilities, Forest Service municipally owned utility in Colorado Springs. Uh, Great place to work, great people, and they had a GIS, a Geographic Information System, one of the early ones that any utility had. I didn't work there. I worked in an engineering department next to it. Fell in love. It was a 2-second thing. I was like, you can organize all the data in the world around a map, something you could see. And I knew at that moment it was true love. So I sort of matriculated through water engineering, getting raised by pipe fitters, making maps, doing analysis. Same thing with electric. And because the utilities had such vast data about water, pipelines, parcels, everything, pipes and wires and all the buildings infrastructure, the fire department and other departments would come and want to use that data. And I was fortunate enough to work on a lot of those sort of things that didn't fit, weird things. And so, I'm a crazy captain from Colorado Springs, Colorado Springs Fire, Captain Mills, came in looking for data, wanting to do wildland fire parcel-based risk assessment super early. That's probably 1998, 1999. Chief Manny Navarro was our chief at that time, really progressive leader in terms of tech, and had come from Oakland in California, had seen what fire had done, recognized the interface in Colorado Springs. And so that eccentric captain became a true mentor of mine. And so I had been sort of raised on tech and learned that kind of stuff, mapping GIS analysis from pipe fitters, electric linemen, and it didn't take too long to start doing that for the fire department. And dream job, love it. CSFD is family to me, always will be, always has been, and had no intention ever to leave the day I started. I was making the money I would make for the rest of my life, no raises in my future ever, and perfectly happy. And Colorado just didn't have the frequency of burn that they do now. Over time, we've seen that shift, as you guys well know. And we had our first big wildland fire in a long time, 136,000 acres, the Hayman Fire in June of 2001. And I was immediately deployed. I'd been working on the parcel-based risk assessment stuff, parcel by parcel. How does the structure influence the underpinning landscape and fire? Long story short, they were just in the same vein as where I'd come from. They ruggedized me. They sent me to every deployment. They included me operationally. They really gave me a gift of saying, if you can help us, we'll explain it. That was easy for me to understand because like I'd come from very practical roots that way. So if something works for ops, if something gives an answer to a fire person, they'll use it. And there's not a discussion or a debate. And if it doesn't work, that was probably the bigger gift is I can't repeat it on a podcast, but they tell you out of pound sand, and they tell you that
Yeah,
very quickly. You adjust course and adjust fire pretty fast in that cauldron. And so I did that for a long
it's a
time.
plain spoken community,
Yep.
isn't it?
It's a very plain spoken, direct style of communication. So you do practical things, you do stuff that matters. And that was the heartbeat of CSFD in their leadership. And that was, we're trying to make a difference. It was a great department. They had everything from
Yep.
wildland to search and rescue to hazmat to big interstates to municipal and EMS stuff. So full service, from motorcycles to high angle and everything in between. And just 1,000 reps. I really quickly became like a unit in CAD. And so anything big, I just got to go do, and so I got to sit and watch really talented people operate and see what mattered. And for me, I think the thread that started everything was just there's information that you don't have and you have to make a decision. And so to fill that gap and say they need to know certain things at certain times and they can make better decisions. They're good with their experience. So this lesson of get out of the way, provide them with what they need. One of the lessons Captain Mills taught me was you're standing too close to the IC. And I didn't know what that meant at first. And what it meant was I was providing highly visual, like a plume model, or something like that, or a wildland fire model prediction or a blast model or something. And he would say, you're standing too close to the IC. And I said, I'm scribing, like I'm helping them and they want this information. I'm not sure what you mean, Cap. And he said, you know that the models that you're showing, like over or under predict, right? Like that's not exactly square foot of where it is. And I said, right, yeah, of course. And he said, but you're showing them a very definitive border on a map. So you have to learn how to communicate and help and guide a good decision and not make it for them accidentally. And so just a million things, a million calls, every big call. So I was on call, slept with a pager under my pillow for years, and they would just come by and pick me up or have them meet them at the fire ground and do those things. So in the course of that, the rest of it's pretty straight line. I would deploy and deploy and deploy to California with Chief Z to area command, and I would be a GIS and intel guy, often paired with a remote sensing guy. So we would bring overhead imagery and what has now become a little bit more mainstream with infrared aircraft and military assets and satellites that detect those things, and trying to make a chain of a workflow that could collect data, make insight or intel, and get that to an incident commander before it was a history lesson. And out of that, multiple times doing that kind of thing and automating those things, sort of a bagpipes and beer story, we end up deciding to start a company and automate some of those workflows. And then it took off kind of accidentally, went to work for
Intera,
NIST, yeah,
right?
Intera, and then terrific run with those people, and they're still around doing it and doing great. And so over time, I sold that to my partners and some resources that could help them accelerate. And I think they're starting to do that. And then for me, I wasn't done. There was this seed of, I'm in the fire service. I've learned from people like the two of you the things that are important, how to do these things, and sort of this bilingual. I know how to do the tech, and I am learning how to talk and make a difference operationally. So you start to build tools that are practical. So I didn't want to retire. I wanted to think about what was next. So I wanted a place that wasn't a bootstrap startup, that had resources that could really make a difference and leave a legacy, almost give back to CSFD, if you will, and say, they'll never know my name. It doesn't really matter. None of that. But every call, every patient, every occupancy, every life-saving tool, I want to reduce cognitive demand, give them that information that they want, make it seamless and easy the way they use stuff, and nobody ever knows you were there. They're just helping somebody.
That's awesome. And that's kind of what led you to where you're at now, leading emergent and, all the different verticals. I know you're the architect behind multiple companies' vision there. And Kim, I know you had a question for David about that.
Well, I actually share a little bit. You know, David and I again go back a long ways when we were boots on the ground. But what's more interesting is that his time there at Antero, we were able to work together. I was actually, doing things at the state level, and we were working on the program now called Scout. And it was kind of interesting because our paths crossed quite a bit. And of course, Kay Dargan and I go back a ways. I really didn't know Brian Cullen very much at the time, but David and I would find ourselves in he'd be teaching or I'd come up, and we were really, those were the very early days of integration. And that's really the one thing we were trying to do on anything is that it didn't matter with his program or the state's program, and Terrence and David were working on integration and sharing of that data regardless. And I think that's one of the kind of interesting things. And, he's kind of kept down that path. And, Kate and I had worked together, and during the 2007 fires, we actually had access to the DoD satellites. In fact, even got authorization to move them for our needs, which people, that's never going to happen. I said, never say never, but it's been an interesting drill and kind of watching all this as it goes. And I became friends with Brian. We've continued all that. And what's even more amazing is, years down the road, we're all working, with Western doing stuff together again. But anyway, I was going to have you really talk a little about emergence, deep public safety routes, and can you talk a little about that and some of that?
You're right. The watershed moment that Kim and Kate and Brian and the team worked on really was interoperability and trying to give boots on the ground real insight into what was happening in near real time, what was going to happen, where everybody was arrayed around a big wildfire, for instance. And Chief Z, you were just part and parcel of seeing that early. You knew, that all that interoperability wasn't going to be the sexiest thing, but it would make the biggest difference. And so that's a real pattern that we see with virus and a bunch of even like wonderful things like Watch Duty, where integration is just is part and parcel of what we do. It's the DNA. And so Emergent was me standing back and looking at where could you make the biggest difference. And so we had been doing huge, super sexy, big events, massive wildfires and hurricanes and things like that on a national scale, tying feds and states and local responders all together, on the software side, very much like FirstNet and broadband is doing for the network and for comms on that. And so we'll come back to that. But the idea with where I wanted to land was someplace that understood that DNA. And so I found I'd known a man named Rex Hughes over the years and respected him. He had a lot of deep ties to the West, to wildfire. He's a super successful entrepreneur with fire truck dealership, Hughes Fire Equipment out of Springfield, Oregon, 8-state Pierce dealer, and lots of things. So they were doing a lot of stuff with equipment. And they had a little software company that had been supporting Walton Valley Fire and Rescue because TBF&R looked around and said, this is just software. It's not reducing cognitive demand. It's about billing. It's about all this. So we need to help the medics think about the call. And that moment sort of crystallized it for me because I could work with and for Mr. Hughes and his team and take the seed of that idea that TBF&R developed. No fire department ultimately wants to be a software company. And that was so field centric. It was about the patient. It was about meaningful PCR. It was about just doing your work and being done with that reporting right away and having highly accurate data. So I could see right away with Rex that there was an opportunity to find more data. The fire truck is just a rolling information node. Every wheel, every pump, every hose line, every piece of life-saving equipment that's on it was untapped data. It was a way to automate the reporting that people do and make that patient focused and not report focused, so life in the station gets better. Life using that data, which had been my background, was better for analysis. So I just saw a runway there where we could build something out that wasn't this grandiose, massive event things, although it does that very well. But it was the everyday, everyone's stuck in the tub or having their worst day or anything from a cat in a tree to, something more complex. That is where the fire service lives, in communities, one-on-one with people. And so the best way for us to sort of continue down the path was make a real difference materially in the fabric of the fire service by giving them better tools.
Yeah. One of the more interesting, I think when I see out there that, what you're doing apparatus in particular, taking, analyzing that data so we know really what the apparatus is doing, how we're utilizing it, everything from knowing when to activate it, geofencing them, being able to know when the pumps are running and, when an idiot light comes on and what the troops did or didn't do with it. There's so much technology there in the work you're doing with Pierce. I still think we're just barely on top of really scratching where that is, because one of the things I really see is that now we've got to get not only we've got to take the tech and we've got to get the on board with analyzing that tech to better utilize it for where we're going in the future.
I agree with that. There's a lot to unpack there, but in a 30-second, sort of soundbite is, I just want to be the connective tissue for fire and EMS. If we can bring together fleet, telemetry, incident command, inspections, EMS, fighting fire, checklists, those kinds of things. I'm not really super interested in being like an all-in-one, thing. Like I just want to be laser focused and not necessarily be an RMS. I am by virtue of on connective tissue, but I have to always be constantly focused on the field. It is hard to talk to a nice old lady at a wrinkle ranch and have that conversation and capture her vitals and understand what's going on with that person and take care of her deep in a building. So this confluence of tech is coming to us. There's software that's gotten easier and easier. I can connect IoT devices, so the truck, the wheel, the hose, the pump, the SCBA, the cardiac monitor, all those little devices are talking, they're chatting like birds on a wire and sending information. So that's good, but you have to have a network that can connect that. So with the advent, thanks to you two and other really talented people like you, now we had a public safety grade network in FirstNet. And so I had relentless connectivity so I could operate in the field. I could talk to all those devices. I could offload all of that from the firefighter. They don't have to enter that. I don't have to even say I'm responding if the wheel's moving. The wheel knows that. And the location knows that. I don't have to say, we're flowing water if I can tell from the pump or the hose or the pre-connect. Any of those kinds of things are just information that we want to have. And on the other side as chiefs, you have to analyze your performance. You have to understand the health and well-being of your firefighters. You have to understand exposures and occupancies. And those were all separate things. And so we just sort of focus on getting that data, giving it to the right person at the right place. It has to know who you are and what you're doing and what you need to know. And letting that just be an easy reference, whether it's a medical protocol or a hazmat fire standard operating procedure, who's inside, who's outside. So it's the same song, different verse, integrating a lot of data that we started on wildfires and big stuff and satellites, and then moving that into an insanely practical thing with a robust network that lets me process information at the edge, give people a user experience that's easy, automate their reports for them, and then ultimately, nobody cares about this, but it's the thing, is make perfect data. If I can make accurate, objective data that the device or the person is doing, it's passive, then I'm not asking a firefighter to do what they didn't sign up for or hate the most and all the reporting. I just make perfect data so we can make good decisions. And then that has a real progression into the future with agents and AI and things that I don't really like to talk about. Like we talk about solving a problem in the field, that just means it's always the same as if you have good information and helpful guidance, then as a incident commander, I don't have to stand too close to the IC. They can use the years of their experience and make terrific decisions, whether that's a medic that's 10 minutes old or a brand new lieutenant or a seasoned type 1 incident commander. They just have an information deficit that now we can overcome.
It is interesting. You think about perfect data. With my luck, if I had perfect data, I'd forget the password to the perfect data room.
We work
And
around
I
people
wouldn't be
like
able
you.
to get one
Yes.
without calling a bunch of people. David, there was a moment when we were younger people where you basically had to buy new PCs every year or every other year just to keep up with the pace that software was developing. You buy yourself a new Windows or whatever it was, and it just ate your computer's capability, and pretty soon it crawled to a stop. So you were jumping back and forth, hardware, software. And then the hardware caught up, and basically we could create enough memory and processing speed to execute about anything we can do. Now we moved into the remote operations, and I don't care if it's email or CADs or whatever. And it really all became about how you, in a time-sensitive manner and reliable manner, move data. And then it became about the wireless era, which brought us FirstNet. And now I really liked your description about how you're the connectivity, right? You're essentially in the nerve center that gets all the various pieces throughout this public safety body connected back to one brain where we can do something with it. And I always appreciated that you could explain stuff to me, but let's explain to our audience just what is emergent. Like what is it? Like, would I see it if I stepped on it? I mean, what is it?
Yeah, emergent is insanely practical. So people will think different things of it, but emergent is the tablet that you have with you or your phone in the field. And so if you're running a medical incident, it knows who you are and what you're doing, and it shows you how to get there, shows you how to get there inside. It lets you care for that patient. It keeps track of the meds. It keeps track of all of the things. If you're fighting a fire, it knows you're fighting a fire, and it says, here's my organizational board, here's my tactical board, and I'm going to see my list of units coming in, and I'll be like, okay, your safety, your fire attack, your ventilation, and I just move it with my finger. Like we're getting the tech out of the way. I don't have to log in and do stuff. I just go like, oh, truck one, vent, or whatever, heavy rescue. I want you to be on RIT or what, so it in the background, it's logging all of that kind of stuff, but you're just working and it's providing support. When you get to the station in the morning, it's your checklist, and it says daily, weekly, monthly checklist, or your med bag or something like that. If you're an inspector, it's the same software, except now it knows you're an inspector, and it just runs down all of the things you need to do to work through systems in a building and record violations and make re-inspections. So it's the thing that builds muscle memory, and then we can use those things. We put a Lego on a truck. I call it a Lego. It's a telemetry control unit, but it's listening to the truck's internal stuff talking, just like if you had a pickup truck and you plugged in to the OBD2 connection and diagnosed what was wrong with it. We just do it a little bit fancier, so it's not passive. We're saying, what is everything doing? And if I know fleet, and I know everything about the incident and what people are doing and the occupancies they're going to, I can start marrying those things. So a lieutenant that's new on the job or on a trade or in a new district can see, here's a history of violations in this occupancy I'm going to. Or for a patient, we've seen this. I haven't. We've seen this person 6 times in the last 3 weeks, and this is what's going on. We can tie into the hospital and say, what was the actual outcome? We dropped them off. We did pre-hospital care, but can we measure ourselves and say, we misdiagnosed it, or we did it wrong, or we didn't know, or that worked, that really, like closing that loop. So it's always integration. That's the lesson that Z taught me in California on the fires. Integrate everything. so smart people can make decisions. And so we just start putting the peanut butter and the jelly together, and I just give you a skinny little tablet, or you pick up your phone or whatever, and you're operating in any capacity in that fire department. And since we believe in interoperability, that means the data can't be held hostage. It's your data as a fire department, and it can go to any other system that you want it to, or come from any system that you have. So not everybody needs a big thing. They just need something. They have other pieces that they love, but they don't have the fleet stuff. So you need to put those Legos on those trucks and then send it to the software that you do love. So that's the other lesson that's counterintuitive, is if you think, oh, I'm sort of a hardware and software and connectivity company. I am not here to disrupt anybody in a bad way. Like, if you have a tool that really works for you, my job is to make sure that the input data for the system that you love gives that person on the boots on the ground that information. Yeah, and you can grow in TARS, but the other part is software scales, so you can make it very affordable. And the best software for anybody should be the best software for everybody. But I don't make software for the only metro fire departments because they pay higher. We just tie it right to the business model is call volume. You run a lot, it costs a little bit more, but the more you run, the cheaper per call it is. But if you're a tiny little department, the wide spot in the road, maybe it's you just run 300 calls a year, super cheap and affordable. Pancake breakfast money. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And David, are we there yet where, like, when we give a drug, I can just say we gave atropine at this, we just gave atropine in this dosage, and it'll do voice to text and pre-enter that on the form? Is like, what you talk about the amount of effort that a paramedic puts into the patient. It's almost like they got to replicate that back at the station when they're filling out their patient care report.
Yeah.
So it's like anything that makes that lighter and easier and automatically populates it. Same could be true for fire. I'm guessing that Emergent has that capability.
Yeah, totally. That's where we start using some of the AI and that kind of thing. I hesitate to even say that word because it's confusing in the market, and it's going to get a little more confusing before it does. A lot of companies will say, sort of like a sticker, a gold star on a Barbie doll, like now with AI. But AI is a tool like anything else. And so it has a marvelous use here because if I have all of that data coming from all the devices and the things that I did, or just on touching and saying, this is what I did, or their software reminds me, you gave a dose of epi, it's been X number of minutes now. It reminds you to do it again. It's just your helper. And then when you go to reporting, I have all that objective data and it writes the report, and people go like, well, we're SOAP people or we're chart people. Well, then we can control that output. So it's like you want it. And the only thing they have to do really is they have to review that, and they could choose not to use that capability at all. But we want them to put in their subjective part. I arrived on a, 2-story wood frame constructed house, and I saw smoke showing out of the Bravo side. So they say that. They just push a button, say it, it records it, and it inserts it. And we have a whole record, from every unit between all of them like that. So they're
That's
just
awesome.
talking to it most of the time, about 95% of the time. By the time they get back on the rig, they are done with their report. And they like that because they go back to doing what they need to be doing and not, stacking up 7 or 8 reports for later.
I'm going to turn this back to Chief Z, but I'm just sitting here thinking about open comments of Rex Hughes. Yet every executive I know at the Hughes family of companies has a public safety background.
Yeah. They're
who else gets to
they're
say
like
that?
4th
Every one of them.
generation public safety, like old school.
Yeah.
And then the people that work there came out of fire departments. The CEOs of those companies are chiefs, or super deep backgrounds in public safety and law enforcement. And, so it's just
really cool.
Yeah, it is. It is not a foreign concept. It's in the DNA. And a lot of people say, like, for firefighters, by firefighters. I respect that. I think that's cool. Like, that's talking about focus. But it's different for me in my professional experience to have public safety that is the DNA of these 5 companies. So whether we have fire trucks, whether we're cleaning gear and getting all the carcinogens out, whether we're making software that's the connective tissue to all of those things, think about that. Like, if I can keep track of the truck, I know it better because we have a fire truck dealership. If I care about a legacy and what's important in the fire service, we die of heart attacks and cancer, job-related things. So with the software, I'm tracking every call you went to and what you did, your exposure. With gear cleaning stuff, I'm saying your PPE went to these incidents and we're cleaning it for you. So I know you were exposed and I'm not just getting like water-based chemicals out.
Yeah, it's carbon dioxide.
Yeah,
right?
it's carbon dioxide. And so I'm floating all of the carcinogens out. So over time, we need to see a reduction in cancer and the rate and incidence of cancer. I need to be able to track and understand exposures on a human level, not just a departmental level, like per firefighter. And I need to have everything that we did in terms of like, what buildings were we in? What did we know about them? Or what equipment did we take and how did it perform? What did we have? What did we use? It's just seamless. And that's why Mr. Hughes picks those companies. It's very strategic. And like, I'm a software guy, like, you know, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And he's really taught me, I need to understand we can affect cancer. We can affect safety with the right equipment. We can make data move. We can help people on that call, but also over the length of their career, have them avoid life-altering exposures that they have and really be methodical about that. So it's a very long-term view. It's a buy and hold kind of view. And and I've never been a part of anything else like that.
That's very cool. Very cool.
So, David, what distinguishes, Emergent from some of the other competition out there, and how does a fire agency engage with you?
Yeah, that's easy. I think that most companies solve one piece of the puzzle. They do billing or they do incident command or they do an RMS, and so I want to be a platform that integrates those pieces in real time, but I'm trying to replicate a model of do everything in a fire department and be a master of none of those things. Like there's software in the market that's poor or it takes forever to implement. And so we have to be laser focused on, we don't build it unless we're solving a problem. And we start with big problems and we work into small problems. And so that's the guiding mission, is make a difference for a real person. The benefit of that is you make a difference for a department because you're integrating a lot of that, or you're helping them with, they have pieces that they like and pieces that they don't like. So we can fit in those gaps. But, in terms of that kind of thing, it's easy to understand how much it costs, and it's easy to, and we can just stand that up and operationalize people very, very quickly. And that's just going to the website emergent.tech or giving a phone call. And that is a very easy, fast way to do it. And I also think there's a reality that tech can be shiny, and some of these ideas are new to some of the people that are listening to us, but it has to be practical, it has to be affordable, it has to solve a real problem. You have to be able to show return on investment. Like, if I'm going to do this, it needs to replace something that I have with something that's better and costs less, or I have to really show value for that thing. And some of the real value will be health, monitoring firefighters for, their biometrics, for when they're training heavy and 3 hours after that, or when they're in a fire. So we can intervene before there's a cardiac issue or a cancer issue. And some of those are the most important things, and they're sort of indirect. But I just mean, like, if you're paying $10,000 as a small department for a checklist software, you should be able to pay $10,000 for all of this stuff. But there has to be a really straight line to return on investment that makes sense to the beam counter, to the chief. The data people have to like it because of the fidelity of the data. And that's all great, but the 800-pound gorilla in the fire services ops. Solve an operational problem and you'll have somebody's attention.
David, my problem is I've got like a ton of more questions. I'm going to have to jump ahead a little bit. But so what does the buying process look like? Like, you've told how to find you, but let's say I'm the chief and I decide this is really important and I'm going to do it. How long till I have it? And do you have to touch every truck? Like, tell me what that looks like.
Yeah. No, the trucks take a minute. You can, if you're installing a Lego on that, you just work that in over PM cycles. And some departments don't get to that for a year or two. But buying it means you have to decide and understand there's a need. We want to do that. From the time that you contacted us to the time that we're working on that thing, we're easy. Like, you can get us through Sourcewell or HGAC or any of the consortiums. The Western Fire Chiefs evaluates technology regularly and says these are the solutions that we see. So they're really, the first question the chief asks is like, that seems interesting. The second question they ask is like, who's using it? Who do I know? Who can I call?
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's why we're here today. The Western has looked at this and says, for this kind of thing, these guys are the best. They're not the biggest, they're the best. And so, so from deciding to do that to contracting and putting it in, like, depends on the complexity and the size of the department, but we have departments that stand up. We can stand a department up with their software alive in a day or two, 48 hours. There's other things with, maybe you want to load all of your historical inspection data, or you have a problematic PSAP, to get your CAD data. That's just you see my gray hair, and that's what we've been doing for 25 years. So believe me, we know how to work around that a little bit. So those things, we just phase them in, and you want to bring something online. You want to make it, usually the bigger issue is, what's the right timing for us as a department to phase this into our training and let our people start to see that and decide how they want to walk that into operations or fire prevention.
David, I think maybe the last question Chief Z and I have for you today is, you spend your every waking moment, if you're not catching brown trout, you're thinking about tech and how to help your average firefighter or cop on the street. What's over the horizon, David, as a wrap up? What's over the horizon? Like, what's the next big thing? Like, what's this look like in 2 or 3 or 4 years? Seems nuts to say it like that. But what's coming that our typical responder doesn't see yet?
100%, it's AI. AI is something that maybe you think of as ChatGPT, or your kids use it to write papers, or maybe you write draft emails or something, ask questions. It is a change in the world and in our industry on the same par as the internal combustion engine or fire or of the wheel. It is one of, 20 things in the history of humanity that will change every single thing. And so what does that mean? That it will be a helper. And a good way to think about it is like a helper or an agent, so AI isn't just a monolithic thing. Like, one of our agents writes your reports. One of our agents listens to your radio traffic and helps you understand what's happening and record that. We have, you want to be able to go to a city council meeting and you prepped with staff what you're going to present with your budget, or you want a news station or something. These kinds of things, you're prepped for that, and you're about 2 questions deep, and then the crazy city councilman from the end of the road asks you a question out of left field. We've all had that. And you go like, good question. I'll go back to staff with that, and we'll come back and we'll have an answer. But with this kind of thing, you can be like, just ask it, or type it and just be like, how many mutual aid runs did we make with Clackamas last year? That kind of thing. And so information at your fingertips, information that serves you, information that watches out for your safety, that's all AI driven. And I think we'll, at some point, these things I don't like to talk about it as AI very much, because I also don't talk about like what flavor of database or what cloud provider or what operating system. It's like, it's a tool. And it just has to meet a human and say, at this point, this person needs information about this, or they need a heads up about that, or they need help finishing this or closing it out or writing the annual report or whatever the thing is. And these agents, and then agents that work together, multi-agentic workflows, will change everything in the next 18 months.
Yep. I like to think of AI like for just your average street person. Just think of it at the origin of the call. That just imagine a truck fire at the intersection of two freeways. The call we care about is the first one. The next 1,000 during rush hour, I don't want to hear. So just having the CAD geofence the first call, and then notice that every other call that comes out of there, and automatically develop a message to those callers saying, if you're calling about the truck fire at 217-95, we got it. This is information we have. Press 9 if you have new information, right? Yeah. That just carves off all that junk. Yeah. To find out the XY of a car accident and swing the Department of Transportation cameras around for the responders to see it and move that data seamlessly to the crews so they can see
every
that.
little thing like
to
that.
capture and move the OnStar predictive injury analytics, to move it out there. There's so much. It just blows the mind. Yeah. Chief Z, any last comments before we wrap up?
Well, it's always a pleasure to chat with David. And, one of the last project that he helped us with was our Western Fire Chief's wildfire map. So we haven't seen that. But just don't spend enough time chatting with David these days. So thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule. And you too, Jay.
Thank you, Chief. David, you're a rock star. We love you here at the Western. We appreciate your friendship. Thanks for all you do, and the Hughes family of companies do for public safety. We're grateful to each and every one of you. I want to thank President Mark Niemeyer of the Western Fire Chiefs and FirstNet for sponsoring today's session. Thank you.
Appreciate you guys. Love you. See you soon.